So I know what you guys are thinking. You woke up this morning, you were excited for his house because you said to yourself, I just hope that Nate talks about the meaning of life today. That's what I've been thinking about. I hope he does that. Well, guess what? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that tonight because it's something that I have been thinking about for the past few months, actually. My wife started her dream job at the beginning of the year. She kind of interviewed for it and was working for it. She knew she'd get it last semester, but she had to wait for it to come. So she got it. She's working her dream job. She's loving what she's doing, and that really made me think about my life. I love being in campus ministry. It made me think about my future, though. Is it something I'm going to do forever? Can I provide for my family with it? What does God want me to do with my life, with my career? What is the meaning of life for me going forward? And after digging into God's Word, which is what you should always do when facing a question like that, I came across the Book of Ecclesiastes. And I can tell you with extreme confidence that I have figured out that I still don't have it figured out. That's what the Book of Ecclesiastes has taught me. But there's some other things from it that I want to share with you. You can see the title of our message today is Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And that's kind of what the Book of Ecclesiastes is known for. When I first read it, I can't remember the last time I read it before the first time I read it. It had been a while. That was the image in my mind. I thought of the author. I honestly thought of him being like this. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Meaningless. And one reason I thought that is because I had just watched Inside Out. I thought that this guy, I thought he was stuck on auto sadness. Just the way he was writing, the words he was saying, the wisdom that he seemed to be sharing was just so depressing and boring. But after reading it a couple times, I've actually spent the last few months just rereading it in my study Bible in different translations. And there's actually a lot of really good things in Ecclesiastes, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. So what can Ecclesiastes teach us? There's some debate as to who the author is. A lot of people believe it's Solomon, who of course is the wisest man ever. And there's a lot of other attributes about Solomon that make his writing very important. There's a lot of themes that he talks about, and I'm going to talk about a few of those themes tonight. The first theme that he mentions is the vanity of life. Ecclesiastes begins and ends with the phrase vanity of vanities, or in other translations, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. It begins and ends with that phrase. So we definitely know that's an important theme. Ecclesiastes 1:2 is the first mention, and Ecclesiastes 12:8 is the last mention, and there's only 12 chapters. So beginning and end, it's bookmarked by meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. And throughout the book, it's actually used 38 times, that phrase, which is more than half of the uses found in the Old Testament. Which is very surprising, and again makes me think of sadness. That's just what he was trying to portray. Literally, the word means vapor or mist. So I also had another visual when thinking of that. That, right there. It's gone. See? You can see it for a second, and then it's gone. Can you guys in the back, can you smell it? Yeah, it's not that important. It's meaningless to be able to smell this because it was just an illustration. But that's the idea, is the vapor, the mist. It's there for a second, and then it's gone. That's a lot of what Solomon talks about in life. So what are some of these vapors of life? The first one is wisdom and knowledge. So we have here the 50th edition of Perry's Chemical Engineer's Handbook. Knowledge, wisdom, right? You think that's important? Well, actually, here's a trash can. It's not. It's not that important. It's meaningless. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 1:13, I applied my heart to seek and search out wisdom, all that is done under heaven. He says in Ecclesiastes 1:16 and 17, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over me. All who were before me, and my heart has had a great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I have applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that all this also is but a striving after the wind. So wisdom and knowledge, seeking after that, is meaningless. The next vanity of life is accomplishments. He says in chapter 2, verses 4 through 6, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. A forest of growing trees. He made all these things, all these accomplishments. He was telling people, look at me, look at what I'm doing. So we have here some weights, right? Look at me, look at how good I look. Look at my muscles. My veins are popping under my shirt, I can assure you. All right? That is meaningless. We've got some fashionable clothes, designer clothes, right? Puma. Puma's big, right? Big brand worldwide. That is also meaningless. I've got a nice, this is still in fashion, right? Argyle? Sweater, nice. Nope. That's also meaningless. We've got a mirror. Ooh. Yes, look at me. Look at how good I look up here, giving a teaching in front of everyone. That's meaningless. Here's a big one for you guys. How about some of these? These are for sale after the teaching, by the way. Diplomas, right? Actual, real life. Well, not that one. That one's empty. But this one has a diploma, Bachelor of Arts, right? Accomplishments, meaningless. This was my grandpa's diesel engineering school certificate, 1937. You know how much good this does him now? Not a whole lot, because it's so old. Accomplishments. They are a vanity of life. We have wealth. I have my wallet here. Good thing that wealth is meaningless because I sure don't have a lot. Solomon says in chapter 2, verses 7 and 6, I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. I looked up his net worth. You know, net worth is a big deal these days. And it's said by some calculations, he was bringing in $1.1 billion US in gold per year through tributes. That was just through tributes, not to mention his father, King David's inheritance. Crazy gifts that all the kings around him were giving, like monkeys and more gold and silver. there are just stories of people coming to see him in Jerusalem and just being in awe of how rich he was, so they gave him more stuff. All the wealth that he accumulated, he says there. That's another a vanity of life. The next one is self-indulgence and pleasure, also known as comfort. This is a huge one for me. I am all about that comfort. Pleasures. So just pleasures in general. He says in chapter 2, verse 1, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasures. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. So we have food, some of my favorite snacks. I've got some Crunch Bars. Who wants a Crunch Bar? Put your hands down. I told you it's meaningless, okay? You guys, I swear. This is also a pleasure. Phones, right? Our phones. We've got laptops. We do a lot of pleasureful things on there. Facebook. We can get into gaming, games. I don't have a PS3 or 4, actually. I don't have any PlayStation, but games, entertainment, movies, those are all vanities of life, and they're meaningless. All meaningless. Another pleasure was excessive alcohol. He said in chapter 2, verse 3, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. We have shot glasses, right? Taking shots, that can be fun, but it's meaningless. Meaningless, all of it's meaningless. Beer bottle, all meaningless. Another pleasure, sex. Whoa, what? Yes, that is a vanity of life. We saw in chapter 2, verses 8, many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. In 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 3, we see that he had 700 wives, 7 with 2 zeros, 700 wives who were princesses, so you know that they looked good, and 300 concubines. A concubine, I looked up the definition, a concubine is a mistress, someone less than a wife, but still, I guess, part of your life, so he would say. This is a condom. He would need a lot of those because 1,000 women at his disposal, and it was all meaningless. The last one that we can kind of generalize is work. He said in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 20 through 23, so I turned about and gave my heart to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he has toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. So we have a very nice Dow Corning jacket. How many people would like to work for Dow or Dow Corning? Right? They take care of you. I know. I have relatives who work there. It's a very nice place to work, but it's meaningless. McDonald's. Ain't nothing wrong with McDonald's. It's a job. It pays you. You make money. You can advance. It's a great place to work, but it's also meaningless. So after all of that is meaningless. His conclusion, Solomon's conclusion, in Ecclesiastes 2, 9 through 11. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all it was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. All those things, nothing to be gained from any of them. He made all of them idols, and found that none delivered on the promise to satisfy him. Each one of those took a turn at being his number one goal in life, and none of them, he said, brought him anything. Now this is not the only theme, but this is a big theme of Ecclesiastes. The next theme that Solomon talks about is the tragic reality of the fall. Now, we know the fall as Adam and Eve, the first people to sin. When they sinned, sin entered the world. Solomon is a wise man, and he understands how the fall reflects life, how life is affected by the fall. It's interesting to note that Paul talks about this later in Romans. He writes in Romans 8:20 and 8:22. In 8:20 he says, "For the creation was subject to futility, not willingly." And he says in verse 22, "For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." Paul uses the Greek word metaiotis. He uses the Greek word metaiotis, which is from the Septuagint, or the Greek Old Testament translation that he would have been reading, which is the word that's used in Ecclesiastes, the 38 times that we talked about. So Paul, talking about the futility that creation is subject to, the groaning pains that we feel in life, that's the same thing that Solomon was talking about, the reality of the fall. Because of the fall, because of sin, life is futile. It stinks. It sucks. There are things in life that suck. This metaiotis, the deeper meaning is what is devoid of truth and appropriateness, perverseness, depravity, frailty, futility, vanity. Those are all things we just talked about. The futility of life is chasing after that which is vapor, chasing after those meaningless things. There is futility in life, and the fall brought on sin and death, which is another theme that Solomon, in all his wisdom, talks about. He addresses the reality of sin in Ecclesiastes 7:20. He says, "Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins." So he addresses that. He says, nobody is perfect. In chapter 7, verses 29, he says, "See, this alone I have found, that God made man upright, but that they have sought out many schemes." So God made us to be good. In the original creation, we were all meant to be good. But we often go our own way and chase meaningless things. This is another theme that he talks about here in sin. He addresses the reality of death also here. He says in chapter 3, verses 18 through 21, "I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. All will go to one place. All are from the dust, and to the dust all return. Who knows where the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of beast goes down into the earth?" Talking about death, and we all die. It's a reality of life because of the fall, because of the futility of life. He says something very similar in chapter 2, verses 14 through 17. "The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them." Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen also to me. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. Death comes to everyone and everything because of sin. It's all a part of life. This is a theme that he talks about in Ecclesiastes. Now I assure you, he does lighten up a little bit in his words of wisdom. The next theme that he talks about is the frustrations and joys of work. So he notes that God gave man work to do in the garden, to cultivate it, to care for it, but after the fall, work became toil and labor, became something to be frustrating. He says in chapter 2, verses 18 and 19, I hated all my toil in which I toiled under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. And in chapter 4, verse 4, then I saw that all toil and all skill in work came from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. Talking about the frustration of work. We've all had jobs or had to work, do things we didn't like. It can be frustrating. That's his point. But he also talks about the joy in work. Chapter 2, verse 24, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. Kind of sounds like the opposite of his first few themes of being depressing. This is where he really turns it around. Chapter 3, verses 22, so I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? And chapter 9, verse 10, whatever your hands find to do, do it with your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. Sheol in those days was just a word for death, just a place of death. That's where you're going to die. So there's no knowledge or thought or wisdom. You don't have to worry about that when you're dead. So whatever your hands find to do, do it with your might. That verse is the verse that really stuck with me when trying to figure out kind of what to do. What is life about? What do I do with my life? You could do a whole message on just this thought, this idea. But it doesn't really matter so much what you do, it's how you do it. I wish someone would have told me that in college. Attending here, I changed my major 6 times. And I was always trying to figure out, what do I do? Like, will I do this forever? What if I don't like it? Well, I better be sure. And then I would go along that major path and then find, you know what, there's just this one thing that I don't like about it. I need to switch. I need to find something else. But really, it's not so much what you do, it's how you do it. You need to find work that brings you joy and not make it your God. That's what Solomon says about the joy and frustration of work. It's frustrating when you put your whole life into your work and it doesn't satisfy you. That's why you need to find joy in it. The next theme that he talks about is the grateful enjoyment of God's good gifts. So everything that is meaningless is not meaningless if it's approached correctly. All those things I threw in the trash, they are meaningless in the sense that if they are your ultimate goal in life, if they are what you strive after, you will be striving after the wind. You will always be chasing that. Solomon addresses that here, saying that God gives us good gifts. Despite his view of reality in the fallen world and all his seriousness about how bad life can be, he's not blind to the beauty of the world God created. He says in chapter 3, verse 11, He, meaning God, has made everything beautiful in its time. He does not hate the good things that God has given. And he addresses this in chapter 3, verses 12 through 13. He says, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat, drink, and take pleasure in his toil. This guy likes eating and drinking a lot. I've noticed that. This is God's gift to man. In chapter 5, verses 18 and 20, he says, Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat, drink, and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with the joy in his heart. So you can be occupied with the joy in your heart by what God has given you. The last one, Ecclesiastes 8:15, he says, And I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat, drink, and be joyful. For this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. He's saying be joyful in the moment. Enjoy whatever you're doing. Enjoy that which God has given you. It is for our pleasure, not our worship, that God gives us these things. And the last theme that he talks about, and it's the most important, is the fear of God. That's the last theme. The fact that all is vanity and meaningless, it should drive us to take refuge in God. Solomon notes that his works, God's works, the things that God does, endure forever. He says in chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it nor taken away from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks that which is driven away. And again in chapter 12, verses 13, right at the very end of Ecclesiastes, he said, The end of the matter, all has been heard. After reading the whole book, you've heard it all. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Fearing God above these meaningless things is what Solomon is talking about. Putting all your trust in those things is where we get into trouble, because it's all vanity, it's all fleeting, it all dissolves. If you throw all this in a landfill, it'll be dissolved within your lifetime, but not God. God is constant, he's in control, he is where we find our significance and our comfort. Everything is fleeting except God, but he is constant in all the meaninglessness of life. So as you can see, Ecclesiastes, it's not Solomon just being depressed all the time. He's just being a realist with life. Life sucks. You cannot look me in the eye and tell me that you don't think there are some things in life that just suck, that you would change, that you know aren't right. That's what Solomon is saying. Work can be hard, work can be frustrating, but it can also be good. If you put your faith in meaningless things, life will be terrible. But if you put it in God, you will find significance and purpose. To summarize as best I can, everything is meaningless apart from fearing God. Enjoy God's gifts, but not more than the one who gives the gifts. Do your best at whatever you do, whatever your major is, whatever your career is. Find joy in the work that God has given you and fear him and keep his commandments. Life is meaningless if God isn't meaningful in your life. So with that said, with God being meaningful in your life, that means your life is meaningful. That is what I have discovered over the past few months. That is what I impart to you as the meaning of life according to Solomon. That things are meaningless, but God is meaningful. And if you are struggling with meaningless things, being your God, being your idol, being your number one in life, I encourage you to come talk to the prayer team. We'll be in the back. We can relate to you because everyone has made something meaningless, tried to make it something meaningful in their lives. We've all done it. We've all put that thing on a pedestal and tried to find significance in that. So if you are really struggling with that, I encourage you to just come talk to us or your friends. Read Ecclesiastes for yourself. If you want to get a deeper understanding, I hope I didn't paint it as a terrible and laboring project that I went through. I actually had a lot of fun reading it. It really made me reflect on life, on my future, on what God taught Solomon through his experience in life. It's like reading his journal. He wanted to impart this wisdom to us through God's Word, and I think he did a really good job of that. So I'm going to pray to conclude us, and that's what I want us to think about this week.